On the 26th of June 1944, the humid air of Hollandia Air Base clung to the palm-thatched recreation hall where Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald paused his checkers game, startled by a visitor. Charles Lindbergh, America's most famous aviator, standing at the screen door with quiet confidence. The Charles Lindbergh, hero of the 1927 transatlantic flight, had arrived in the Pacific's heart, thousands of miles from home, to discuss P-38 Lightning operations with the battle-hardened 475th Fighter Group, Satan's Angels. Pilots exchanged skeptical glances, their war-weary faces questioning what a 2-year-old civilian could teach aces in a twin-engine beast. Yet, over 6 weeks, Lindbergh would revolutionize long-range fighter operations, stretching the P-38's combat radius by nearly 400 miles, turning the impossible into routine. 17 years earlier, he had flown 3,600 miles alone in the Spirit of St. Louis, landing with 85 gallons of fuel to spare a masterclass in efficiency that baffled experts. Now, in the sweltering jungle, his expertise faced institutional resistance and pilot instincts, challenging everything they knew about engine management. Lindbergh's arrival was no mere visit. It was the spark of a saga that would redefine aerial warfare. From a deadly dogfight with a Japanese Zero to a kill against a Mitsubishi Sonya, he proved his methods in combat, risking his life alongside Satan's Angels. By October 1944, his fuel-saving techniques empowered MacArthur's Philippines campaign, saving lives and rewriting the Pacific War's map. This is the story of a civilian who transformed a war machine through knowledge, courage, and the relentless pursuit of the possible. The air at Hollandia Air Base, Dutch New Guinea, was thick with humidity on the 26th of June 1944, the jungle's heat seeping into the palm-thatched recreation hall. Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald leaned over a checkers board, his focus locked on outmaneuvering Lieutenant Colonel Merrill Smith, the operations officer of the 475th Fighter Group known as Satan's Angels. A figure appeared at the screen door, his voice cutting through the clatter of the game. "Charles Lindbergh," he said, the name carrying a quiet confidence that made MacDonald pause. The Charles Lindbergh, America's most famous aviator, hero of the 1927 transatlantic flight, stood in their makeshift outpost, thousands of miles from home, requesting to discuss P-38 combat operations. The pilots exchanged glances, their sunburned faces a mix of curiosity and doubt. What was a celebrity doing in their war-torn corner of the Pacific? Neither MacDonald nor Lindbergh could know that this moment would spark a revolution in long-range fighter operations. Over the next 6 weeks, Lindbergh would teach techniques that extended the Lockheed P-38 Lightning's combat radius by nearly 400 miles, turning what pilots deemed impossible into routine. This wasn't just a technical tale, it was a story of defying institutional resistance, of pilots learning to trust mathematics over instinct, and of one man's fuel efficiency expertise reshaping the Pacific Air War. The journey to this moment began 17 years earlier. On May 2021, 1927, when Lindbergh flew 3,600 miles from New York to Paris in the Spirit of St. Louis. The Ryan NYP monoplane, its fuel tanks blocking forward vision, demanded navigation by periscope and dead reckoning. Landing at Le Bourget Field with 85 gallons remaining, Lindbergh achieved a fuel economy that stunned experts, a testament to his obsessive precision. That mastery, honed over years, was about to meet the P-38, a twin-engine marvel struggling to reach distant targets. The base buzzed with the distant roar of engines and the chatter of men living on the edge. Lindbergh's arrival felt like a plot twist in a war that thrived on surprises, and the pilots wondered, could this civilian really teach them anything about their deadly trade? Charles Lindbergh's name was synonymous with aviation triumph, but it came with shadows. In 1927, he had flown solo across the Atlantic, 3,600 miles in 33.5 hours, in a monoplane so fuel-heavy it required a periscope to see ahead. His journal from that flight reveals a mind consumed by efficiency. Fuel is life, and every gallon is a choice. Through the 1,930 seconds working for Pan American Airways, he surveyed routes across the Pacific and Atlantic, refining techniques that pushed aircraft beyond manufacturer specs. He mastered the delicate balance of manifold pressure, propeller, RPM, and mixture settings, finding the optimal envelope where power, fuel, and engine stress aligned. By 1944, he was a global expert in long-range flight, but his pre-war politics had made him a pariah. Leading the America First Committee, Lindbergh argued against U.S. involvement in Europe's wars, earning President Roosevelt's wrath. In April 1941, after Roosevelt likened him to a Confederate sympathizer, Lindbergh resigned his Air Corps Reserve Commission, writing bitterly, "I fly for progress, not power." Pearl Harbor changed the game, but Roosevelt ensured Lindbergh would not serve in uniform. Undeterred, he joined United Aircraft in 1943 as a civilian consultant, troubleshooting B-24 Liberator production at Ford's Willow Run plant and testing P-47 Thunderbolts at high altitudes. His work with F-4U Corsairs improved dive bombing techniques, saving missions and lives, yet Lindbergh yearned for combat. In early 1944, United Aircraft's interest in twin-engine fighters offered a chance. The P-38 Lightning, America's only such fighter, needed study in combat conditions. Lindbergh saw his path to the Pacific, where vast distances demanded his expertise. As he prepared, he confided in his diary, "War tests knowledge, and I will answer." His past trailed him like a storm cloud, but his skills were about to shine brighter. On the 3rd of April 1944, Charles Lindbergh stood in Brooks Brothers, New York, choosing a naval officer's uniform without insignia, a civilian's armor for a war zone. At Brentano's bookstore, he picked a small New Testament, noting in his journal, "One book, small enough to carry, and this speaks to me now." Departing San Diego on April 24, he headed for Marine Corps bases near Guadalcanal. His mission authorized by the Navy but concealed from Roosevelt and Secretary Frank Knox. The Pacific greeted him with oppressive heat, the buzz of insects, and the ever-present threat of Japanese raids. Tasked with observing F-4U Corsair operations, Lindbergh quickly became a participant. On the 21st of May 1944, he flew a strafing run with Marine Fighting Squadron 222 near Rabaul. His guns hot despite the observer label. He taught Corsair pilots to double their bomb load safely, analyzing power settings and weight distribution to curb crashes. His fixes stunned the Marines, who had lost planes to overloading. The Pacific's vast blue expanses, dotted with coral islands, demanded range Lindbergh's specialty. Over tin-cup dinners, he bonded with pilots, their laughter a brief respite from war's grind. By mid-June, his focus shifted to the P-38 Lightning. Spurred by United Aircraft's interest and rumors of the 475th Fighter Group's prowess. On June 15, he hitched a flight to Finschhafen, New Guinea, dining with General Innes Whitehead to secure informal approval for P-38 observation. The jungle's fuel and sweat scent fueled his resolve. In a theater where competence trumped protocol, Lindbergh's arrival was a spark, igniting possibilities in a war defined by limits. The P-38 Lightning and the 475th Fighter Group. The P-38 Lightning was a marvel of engineering, twin engines, twin booms, and a reputation for power, but its fuel range was a leash. At Hollandia Air Base, the 475th Fighter Group, Satan's Angels, had tamed it into a legend. Activated in Australia in May 1943, its three squadrons, 431st, 432nd, and 433rd, flew P-38 Jules models with enhanced intercoolers and fuel capacity. Yet even with drop tanks, missions to distant targets left pilots with scant fuel for combat, and detours cost lives. On the 20th of June 1944, Lindbergh took his first P-38 flight with the 35th Squadron, mastering the fighter in 80 minutes. On June 26, he walked into the 475th Recreation Hall, interrupting Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald's checkers game. At 29, MacDonald, a 10-victory ace, commanded respect. Major Thomas Maguire, with 15 kills, smirked, muttering, "What's this old-timer think he can teach us?" The hall's dirt floor and flickering bulbs framed a tense moment. Lindbergh cited General Hutchinson's orders to discuss P-38 operations, earning MacDonald's attention. The commander offered a mission the next day and a cot to avoid travel hassles. Word spread, Charles Lindbergh was joining Satan's Angels. Lieutenant John Pererty, a young pilot, grinned, whispering, "The guy who flew to Paris is flying with us." Others scoffed, doubting a 42-year-old civilian's place in their cockpit. The P-38's cramped quarters pilots sat on parachutes and rafts, tested endurance. And the 475th pushed it to its limits. Lindbergh's presence stirred doubt, but also a flicker of hope that this outsider might unlock something new. Lindbergh's first combat mission with the 475th. Rain pounded Hollandia at 0530 on the 27th of June 1944, delaying the dawn mission. By 10:30, the skies cleared, and 4 P-38 seconds took off for Jeffman Island, led by Charles MacDonald. Lindbergh, as Blue 3 on Major Thomas Maguire's wing, flew alongside Merrill Smith, an 8-victory ace. Despite only days of P-38 experience, Lindbergh's formation flying was flawless. His twin-boom fighter cutting through the clouds with precision. The mission targeted a Japanese barge in Kaiboes Bay, and anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky. Lindbergh dove through the flak, his 20mm cannon and 50 caliber guns shredding the target. The barge burned, and all 4 planes returned safely. Back at base, the ground crew made a startling discovery. Lindbergh's P-38 had significantly more fuel left than the others. On July 1, after a 6.5-hour reconnaissance mission to Gilving Bay, he landed with 210 gallons remaining, while others limped back near empty. On July 3, escorting B-25 bombers to Jeffman Island, Lindbergh kept hunting barges as 2 pilots broke off, fuel-starved. His gauges showed reserves that baffled the crew chiefs. MacDonald, intrigued, called a meeting in the recreation hall, its dirt floor packed with pilots nursing warm beers. Lindbergh stood before them, a civilian among aces, ready to share a secret that could redefine their war. The air was heavy with the scent of fuel and sweat, and the pilots leaned in, torn between doubt and curiosity. Lindbergh's fuel logs were a challenge to everything they knew, and the stage was set for a revolution. Unveiling the cruise control techniques. In the flickering light of Hollandia's recreation hall, Lieutenant Colonel Charles MacDonald introduced Charles Lindbergh to the 475th's pilots, pointing to fuel logs that showed his P-38 seconds returning with reserves others lacked. Lindbergh, calm but commanding, explained his cruise control techniques. Standard P-38 procedure, 2,400 revolutions per minute. Auto-rich mixture was safe but wasteful. He proposed cutting engine speed to 1,600 revolutions per minute, setting the mixture to auto-lean, and raising manifold pressure to 30 inches, maintaining 185 miles per hour's airspeed. This slashed fuel use to 70 gallons per hour, achieving 2.6 miles per gallon, and could extend the P-38's radius by 400 miles for 9-hour missions. The pilots stared, silent. 9 hours in the P-38's cramped cockpit, perched on parachutes and rafts, was grueling. Worse, Lindbergh's over-square settings, low RPM, high manifold pressure contradicted training that warned of engine detonation. Lieutenant P-38 muttered, "He's asking us to wreck our Allisons." Another pilot called it dangerous. But McDonald saw the proof. Lindbergh's P-38 seconds had flown combat without issues, their fuel reserves offering flexibility. He ordered tests, saying, "We try it or we keep losing planes." Lindbergh explained the physics. Lower RPM meant fewer combustion cycles. Lean mixtures burned just enough fuel, and moderate manifold pressure avoided stress. The P-38's twin engines made experimentation safer. If one failed, the other could get you home. The hall buzzed with skeptical whispers, but McDonald's resolve was firm. Outside, the jungle's cicadas sang, a reminder of the stakes. Lindbergh stood unshaken, his confidence rooted in decades of defying limits, ready to prove his method in the crucible of war. Testing and proving the techniques. The 475th approached Lindbergh's settings like men testing a rickety bridge. Short initial flights let pilots return quickly if engines faltered. The Allison V-1710 engines hummed differently at 1,600 revolutions per minute. A lower growl that unnerved pilots like Lieutenant John P-38, who gripped the controls, expecting trouble. Yet gauges told a different story. Temperatures normal, oil pressure steady, cylinder heads cooler than at standard settings. On a mission to Jeffman Island, P-38 landed with fuel to spare, stunned. By mid-July 1944, longer missions confirmed the results. The P-38's combat radius stretched from 570 to 750 miles, allowing 15-minute fights over targets with an hour's reserve. Major Thomas McGuire, once a skeptic, grinned, saying, "The civilians got magic." Missions that demanded immediate returns now included extended patrols. Targets once out of reach Japanese airfields deep in enemy territory became viable. Lindbergh flew alongside, proving his method in combat, his P-38 returning from a 9-hour sweep with fuel that felt like a lifeline. A young mechanic, Private Sam Carter, scribbled fuel logs, telling his friend, "This guy's rewriting how we fight." The technique saved lives. Storms no longer doomed detoured pilots, and damaged planes reached home. The 475th's morale surged, their trust in Lindbergh forged by results. Word spread to other squadrons, and commanders demanded briefings. The civilian who had walked into their camp was becoming a legend. His knowledge unlocking a war machine's hidden potential. Lindbergh's combat climax and departure. On the 28th of July 1944, over El Pudi Bay, Lindbergh flew as Blue 3 with the 433rd Squadron on a bomber escort to Surum. Two Mitsubishi Ki-51 Sonias appeared, piloted by Captain Saburo Shimada and Sergeant Yokogi. The P-38 seconds attacked, but Shimada's skill turned it into a 30-minute chase. Yokogi's Sonya burned and crashed, but Shimada dodged, his plane twisting through tight turns. Then, he turned head-on toward Lindbergh at 500 miles per hour. Heart-pounding, Lindbergh aimed at the Sonya's engine. His 20mm cannon and machine guns firing for 6 seconds. Smoke poured from the Mitsubishi, its propeller slowing. Lindbergh pulled up, clearing the plane by feet as it dove into the sea, leaving only foam. Back at base, pilots agreed Lindbergh's burst was decisive, but his civilian status kept the kill unofficial. On August 1, a fighter sweep to the Palau Islands nearly ended in tragedy. A Zero outmaneuvered Lindbergh, and only McDonald's shout, "Break right," and intervention saved him. 5th Air Force Headquarters ordered him home. On the 12th of August 1944, the 475th gathered to see Lindbergh off after 50 combat missions. 25 with their P-38 seconds. Major McGuire shook his hand, saying, "You fought like one of us." Lieutenant Purdy added, "You gave us range we didn't know we had." Lindbergh's nod hid the weight of leaving comrades. As his transport climbed, the pilots knew they'd lost a brother who'd risked everything to teach them. Widespread adoption and strategic impact. By October 1944, Lindbergh's techniques had spread across Pacific P-38 units. Squadrons tweaked his settings 1,600 revolutions per minute. Auto-lean mixture, 30 inches manifold pressure for their conditions, achieving 950-mile missions with 15-minute combat and an hour's reserve. Japanese bases once safe now faced P-38 seconds that could fight and return. During MacArthur's Leyte invasion in October 1944, P-38 seconds from New Guinea and Morotai covered distances once impossible, enabling faster invasions and bypassing islands. A pilot from the 8th Fighter Group wrote home, "We hit targets we couldn't touch before, thanks to a civilian's math. Fuel reserves saved lives, letting pilots navigate storms or limp home damaged. Some commanders resisted, fearing engine wear, but data showed no failures, only savings." The Army Air Forces updated P-38 manuals, making Lindbergh's methods doctrine. The strategic impact was immense. MacArthur's advance gained weeks, airfields became viable sooner, and losses dropped. Mission reports piled up, proving the impossible was now routine. Lindbergh's knowledge had redrawn the Pacific War's map, showing that expertise could shift battles as surely as bombs. Lindbergh's legacy and broader lessons. Charles Lindbergh's Pacific service was a triumph of expertise over convention, returning to the U.S. In August 1944, he evaluated captured Japanese aircraft at Patuxent River and consulted for manufacturers. His 1,970 wartime journals detailed his 1,944 missions with raw honesty. He died of lymphoma on the 26th of August 1974 at 72 inches Maui, buried in a simple coffin under a slab quoting Psalm 139. "If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea," the 475th, with 551 victories, was the war's top P-38 unit. Its aces like Thomas McGuire, 38 kills, empowered by Lindbergh's techniques. Veterans like Colonel Warren Lewis recalled his settings decades later. Lindbergh proved civilians could transform combat, paving the way for military-civilian collaboration. At a 1,970 reunion, 475th pilots toasted Mr. Lindbergh, sharing stories of missions flown farther and safer. His legacy teaches that limits are starting points, and expertise, proven in action, can change history. Lindbergh arrived a controversial figure but left a teacher, transforming the P-38 into a symbol of ingenuity and proving that knowledge, applied with courage, wins wars.